Hello, I'm Liviu Bolan, and today I will show you how to configure your SSH client in order to increase your productivity. Okay, so if I go to my SSH directory from my home directory, if I type ls, you will see that here I am having two directories, Ubuntu VM and Ubuntu VPS. In these directories, I have the keys that I use when I want to connect to my machines using SSH. Because I don't have my default key, my default keys on my .ssh directory, whenever I want to connect to my machine, I have to specify the key. So if I want to connect to my http.liviubolan.com host using the Liviu user, I have to specify the ID RSA key, which is on the .ssh/Ubuntu VM directory from my home directory. So if I run this command, I am able to connect to my virtual machine, which is the one started here. If I want to connect to my VPS, also I have to specify the user, host, and the key. As you can see here, now I'm on my VPS host with my l.bolan username. See that for the first host and the second one, I have different users. Now, what I want to achieve is that when I use the SSH command for one host, I want to have a default user and a default key. And I don't want to specify the user and the key whenever I log in to a machine. I can do this in two ways. One is to edit the config file located in .ssh directory from my home directory, and another approach is to edit the etc.ssh ssh config file, which is a system-wide configuration. So if you edit something here in this file, every user on this operating system will be able to use the SSH configuration. I don't encourage you to edit this file in order to specify a default user, a default key, and so on, because most of the users will have their own credentials. So the good approach is to edit this file. What will you put in this file? You can see by reading the manual page for ssh_config. So here you will see all the options that you are able to use in order to modify the configuration file, your configuration file. Okay, let's take a look at the system-wide configuration file for SSH. And as you will see here, for the Debian SSH client, the Debian SSH OpenSSH client package sets several options as standard, as you can see here. Because I'm using Linux Mint, which is a fork of Ubuntu, which is a fork of Debian, I am able to see this default configuration. If you want to, as I told you a little earlier, if you want to edit something here, you will have to remove the command here and specify a value for the option that you want to edit. But as I told you a little earlier, I will not edit this file, but I will edit the config specific user file for SSH, which is located in home.ssh/config. As you can see here on this command, the order in which SSH is interpreting your options are command line options, user specific file, the config file, and system-wide SSH config. So if you specify, for example, your identity key by using the command line, when SSH see this option, it will not use the identity file even if you specified it in the config file. If you don't specify any option for identity file on the command line or in the config file, the SSH will look for the identity file in SSH_config. Okay, so let's use vi and let's create a config file in home.ssh. Here I will use some values from a config file that I've already created, but before this, let's see how the configuration file looks like. So you will use the host key, and then you will use a remote alias. The remote alias will be used instead of the host. So if you want to connect to the host livybalan.com in this example, instead of using livybalan.com, you will use, for example, Ubuntu VPS, which is the host that even if it doesn't exist, you will use it only as an internal alias. Then the host name, which is the real name of the host, and some options, for example, the port. If you use the default port 22 for SSH, you don't have to specify the port. But if you use a custom port, you will have to specify the port. Okay, so let's use the Ubuntu VM configuration from here. And for example, because I'm using the port 22, I will remove the port option. And I will save this file. Now, if I type SSH U and hit tab, you will see here that I am able to use SSH with the alias that I've previously created. So if I hit enter, I will connect to my Ubuntu VM, to my Ubuntu virtual machine using the user livy and the identity file located in Ubuntu VPS directory. So all I have to do when I connect to my machine is to type SSH and then the alias. Okay, now let's connect to my SSH and open another terminal tab. If I type sudo vi /atc ssh dconfig, and here I will change the port. For example, 22022. Save it and restart the SSH service. Now all I have to do is that in the config file to specify the port. Notice that if I don't save it and want to use SSH Ubuntu VM, the connection will be refused because 22 is not the port that I will have to use. So if I edit the config file and here I will specify the port 22022. Now if I use SSH to connect to my Ubuntu VM, everything works okay. Now I have another configuration file which is for a VPS of mine, and as you can see here I will use another username with another identity file, because even if the identity file name is the same, is located in another directory. As you can see here, this one is in Ubuntu VPS and this one is in Ubuntu VM, and the host name is another. Now save it and type SSH Ubuntu VPS. Now as you can see here, I am connected to my VPS. Now if I edit the config file again, you will see something interesting, because you can select a host, as you can see here, by using a regular expression. So what this will tell you is that for all hosts, do this stuff. As you can see here, the host for all the hosts I use a default user, but I don't specify the user on the beginning of the file, but instead on the end of the file. Why? This is because, as you can see here, most host-specific declarations should be given near the beginning of the file and general defaults at the end. When SSH matches your host, it applies the options that it encounters. So, for example, if I put my username at the beginning of the file here, it will find that my current host matches this declaration and use the default user livu.balan for all my hosts and my SSH configurations. But I don't want to use it because, as you can see here, for one host I have this user and for another host I have this user. Okay, if I use the default hosts as I shown you a little earlier here and use the default user livu.balan, I can comment this line and everything will work well, because here I specify the identity, no, not here, but let's type here the user livu, and here I will comment this line. So when I will use Ubuntu VM, I will use the host name http.livubalan.com, the port 22022, the identity file from here, and because I don't specify the user here, will be used the default user, which is livu. So if I use Ubuntu VM, everything will work well, because as you can see here, the default user that I specified on the end is used. Let's edit the config file again, put the default like on the previous, and I will show you some default useful options that you may want to use. So for all the hosts, I will use the server alive interval, which keeps the connections alive to avoid timeout. So from time to time, for example 122 seconds, the client will send some packages to the server even if you don't do anything from SSH. This is only to avoid connection timeout. Okay, another option here is strict host checking with no. This will disable host checking, but be very careful because this can be a big security risk. So make sure you know what you are doing. What this does, for example, if you connect using SSH to Ubuntu VM, what this do is that is not writing anything to the known hosts. Also, you will have to uncomment this line, user known hosts file, to write anything to dev null. So now, as you can see here, you will see a warning that permanently added for these hosts and port to the list of known hosts, but nothing is written there because of the option that I previously shown you. So because it's a security risk, I recommend you to comment this one. And next, I will show you an useful option for multiplexing SSH over a single TCP connection. SSH multiplexing reuses the same TCP connection for multiple SSH sessions. This resolves some of the work necessary to establish a new session, probably speeding things up. So, as you can see here, I use control master, control path, and control persist. But in order to use this, I will have to create this directory. So right and quit, and I will create the multiplex directory in .ssh directory. As you can see here, I have a multiplex directory. If I use ls, the directory is empty. Okay. Now, if I use SSH to connect to a machine and open another tab and go to SSH and see what is inside of multiplex directory, you will see here that a new file is written, which is a socket file. If I open another tab and connect again to Ubuntu VM, you will see that the same socket file is used. If I will exit this file, you will see that the file will not be deleted until all the connections are closed. So if I use Ubuntu VPS instead to connect to my VPS and look at the multiplex directory, you'll see both socket files created here. If I exit my Ubuntu VPS, only my connection to my http.livyballon.com is here. So exit this tab, disconnect from Ubuntu VM again, and here I will not have any socket file, as you can see here. Okay, so if you want to, now if I use the same process again, connect to Ubuntu VM, let's see what is inside of multiplex directory and is the socket file. Exit, look again, there is nothing here. In order to bypass the multiplexing configuration temporarily, you will have to use -s option with none argument. So if I will use this command, I will be able to connect to my virtual machine, but if I will go and see what is inside of multiplex directory, no socket file is created because I've used the -s option. Be very careful when you are using the -s, when you are using the multiplexing, because there are some options that you will not be able to use it when you are using the SSH client. So this is how you can configure your SSH client in order to increase your productivity. And as you saw, after you configured your SSH config file, all you have to do is to specify SSH and the host. After this, you have a default user, a default identity key, a default port. You can specify default settings for all the hosts or for a specific host. Don't forget, if you want to learn more about SSH or if you want to learn more about web technologies, you can see my tutorials on YouTube, and also you can check out my website livyballon.com. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.